And welcome everyone to another episode of the EcoPunks podcast. Today on December 22nd, the last Friday before the official kickoff of the holiday season. Whatever your holiday may be that you celebrate or not, because not everyone does that. We meet today for the second edition in our aging series after we kicked this off and tried to provide a little outline and structure for that series last week with David. We meet today to talk about the ugly topics of ageism and misperceptions as they concern age. And while David is not available today, I am really happy to be joined today by Sherida Ryan, Jeanette Herrle, or Herrle, as we say in Germany, and Scott Suthren. Welcome. Thanks for joining me here today. And I totally forgot to also mention our automated audience that is with us as always. Thank you for the round of applause here, and welcome to an hour of joyful conversation around getting older. Last week, in our session with David, David blew my mind with a few, you could argue obvious insights, but once I digested those, I thought they were really great, because as we embarked here on the aging conversation, I was under the impression we talk about people who are old, right? While David, rightfully so, said, hey, aging is actually something that starts at birth. And up to a certain point, it is actually a positive and really important thing. And at some point, we humans start to view aging as something negative. So that is an interesting thing. The other thing that we found out in last week's discussion was, and that was triggered by a couple of language mishaps on my behalf, that we really struggled with finding language around age, around older, elder people, right? There does not seem to be positive vocabulary in our language that celebrates, older people that have more life experience than younger ones, which is an interesting thing to be aware of as well. Now, speaking about aging starting with birth, I want to start with you, Jeanette, because you mentioned that you might not be able to make it through that podcast here. How is Ella doing? Ella is a goat. Ella is very pregnant and might have offspring any minute, which would fit perfectly into the topic. How is Ella today, Janet?
She's fine. I did check her this morning, and no developments, but she is by nature inscrutable, so she could be birthing right now and I wouldn't know it.
No. All right, Ella, give us another hour. And this is the first time that Ella is giving birth, or is Ella a veteran mom, so to say?
Not exactly a veteran, but this is not her first time either. But so the reason I said that she's hard to read is when she gave birth to her first kid, a buckling that we still have, I didn't know that it had happened. And I came in after to do my evening chores, and I saw this baby goat, and I assumed it was her sister's. Her sister had twins a couple days previous, and I thought it had somehow gotten into her stall and had gotten injured because it had blood on it. I thought, what is going on here? I was so confused. And it took me a full 5 minutes to process. No, Ella had just given birth to this buckling with no warning whatsoever, none of the classic signs that give it away, and had done it so quietly that nobody knew what was going on.
Well, as you said, not the first time, right? Ella might know what she's doing, might have experience to look back on. So, there's that for aging, right? And for being experienced in life.
Absolutely.
Ageism, I think, we can establish exists and is terrible. I think the dominating thing in my mind right now is wherever I look, listen, or go, I hear that Joe Biden shouldn't really, run for president anymore because he's too young. My mother just came over from Germany visiting for the holiday, and apparently the European press is full of that stuff as well, which is shocking because one of the greatest chancellors that the Germans had after the Second World War was actually a really, let's say, seasoned person, right, with a lot of experience, who did our country a lot of good things. And I just find it terrible that the world decided that once you reach a certain age, none of your achievements apparently count anymore, and you shouldn't even run. So that is a little painful. Go ahead, Jeanette.
I was just going to say, I think worse yet, it obscures the many valid reasons why maybe Biden shouldn't run, right? If the age becomes a deflection from where the conversation perhaps actually should be.
Right, correct. It's about here the person instead of the subject matter and the action, right? Yeah, totally agree. Scott, I'd be interested in your take on this. I mean, you and I, no insults to you, are about the same age. How do you feel? What's your prospect for and outlook for the next 10, 20 years?
As far as ageism is concerned, Biden for the next 10, 20 years?
Yourself, your environment.
Well, I mean, it just came out of, I just was, like you, working in the ad biz for a long period of time, and that's an industry that's rife with ageism. There's this sort of built-in perspective that if you are, over the age of even like 35 or 40, then you're out of touch with what's new and what's happening and what's current, and and so there are very, very, very few people still in the biz who are over the age of 50. Right? It becomes, if you're not in senior leadership by that point, you're not in the industry. And it is a real shame. It's a real shame because just flat out, yes, maybe there are some interesting perspectives, from what's novel and what's new that the younger generation brings. But I don't know how many meetings I have been in where ideas or things have been presented that have absolutely no grounding in business strategy or an understanding of the market or anything like that, where the novelty seems to trump the sort of understanding of the context and understanding of the world that can, actually truly only come through experience, right? And so how many ideas have we seen pushed out of agencies that have been, put in market that are cool or whatever you want to say they are, but that they don't move the needle from a business perspective, or are just there because they're, they're novel or whatever like that. So I think, that's just one small thing that comes out of it, but I think it's really unfortunate that the industry has this perspective. And despite the fact that it's talked about a lot, despite the fact that everyone knows about it, and despite the fact there have been articles and books even written on it for the ad biz, it continues to be the perspective. And 80% of any shop will be under the age of 30 or 25.
I love that point, because not only do you encounter that kind of ignorance as an employee, but you also encounter that ignorance as a consumer if you are aged 50 or plus, because all the work that's been done, quote unquote, for you has been done by 25, 30-year-olds, right? And might completely miss the mark now that, people apparently have the opportunity to live up to 100 and also live to 100 well, as they do,
100,
right?
110%. And I'm not being critical of that age group or of those individuals in an agency. I think bring a lot of great things to the table, a lot of merit, and there's a lot of interesting things that come out. So it's not saying it's that they can't do the work. It's just there's a perspective and a depth and a nuance that is missed in that. I was on LinkedIn. A friend of mine posted an ad. I think it was from 2010 or something like that. It was from a beauty brand, and it was, the person who had originally posted it to say, look at the beautiful simplicity of this ad. There's all there was a product shot and then 2 words. Okay. And the 2 words were talk tick. And so it was implying, like, it was an anti-aging cream. It was implying, hey, the clock is ticking. So the friend who posted it is a person who's over 50, and she said, this is insulting. Do they not understand the incredibly negative associations with the phrase TikTok for women as they age, what it is, how it is used, what is said, you know, and or when it is said, the context, and how, you know, just awful it is to use this phrase. And so she was saying it was likely a case where there was some, you know, individual who was developing this who didn't understand what it really meant and the impact it was going to have. And maybe it was just being clever and just pursuing, hey, look at this fun way to articulate this idea. Who knows? We don't know who worked on it, but I mean, but the idea that creative made it into market.
Yeah, I love that example. I love that example, and I'm dying to hear what our resident expert and black belt on trust is thinking here. As you know, Scott is talking about how the advertising industry thinks, you know, they can treat or, you know, serve you know, a quite powerful audience and generation here.
First of all, what I'd like to know is I didn't quite get what it was. Talk tick. So how does that relate to an aging population? Why is that an insult? I'm not getting it.
Because it was an anti-aging cream, and it was saying it was the sort of the inverse of TikTok. TikTok, TikTok, the body clock, you know, is going on, you know, on TikTok, you better have that kid. TikTok, you better get married.
Right.
TikTok,
you're running out of time.
You're running out of time,
you know.
Yeah.
And then so the idea is that talk tick, it's turn back the arrow of time.
Okay.
Look younger.
Okay.
Look more youthful, right? To sort of it basically says fight aging with this product. But what was the point my friend was making was what by using talk tick, it is bringing all the baggage that the phrase TikTok has in an aging context for women.
Now I sort of get it. Okay. I can talk in terms of being the expert on trust, but the other thing that I'm pretty well an expert on is I'm an elder, right? So I have the lived experience of an expert elder, let's say. And one of the things that I find, if we're going to talk about the advertising, the advertising business, is how come nobody is realizing that what's going to happen is the pig in the python is coming through. I'm at the edge of that, great swelling of that generation coming through, and we have basically the money. We are going to be in a big majority coming through. So I would think to myself, well, perhaps you should pay attention to us. And I think that one of the things that we really have to deal with is that I mentioned before in another, another podcast, basically we're cognitive misers. So it's very easy. It's in fact what we normally go to first is to stereotype. And what happens is that there is a misperception that all elderly people will all do this, will all go through this, etc., etc. When there is as much individual difference in terms of elderly people as there is with any age going through. The stereotype of the older woman wanting to look younger, that is a stereotype. There are many women my age and older who are quite happy with what we look like. What we tend to do is we have to make a statement that we're okay with it. Otherwise, people just assume, that we want to look younger, that, etc. When in actual fact, one of the things that my friends and I enjoy is the fact that we are comfortable in our skins, right? That's a wonderful gift that age gives you.
Sherida, you are a wonderful gift for any podcast host because you've given us just so much stuff here that I need to quickly double click in on. The first one is the way you introduce yourself, Sherida, right? I had started off here saying we struggle finding positive language around age. You said, I'm an elder, right? And that has such a weight and so much, aura and now language fails me here, that swings with it. So I want to hold on to that word, that term, and revisit that also in future episodes, because I think that completely, shifts the paradigm from old as in irrelevant to, highly relevant. The second point, that was my earbud.
Came out. I just to that point in terms of an elder, we went for dinner the other night with some friends who came in from Europe, and one of the female in the couple said that she had just celebrated her 80th birthday, and she said that what she enjoyed was that in France, you don't really say, I'm 80 years old. What you say is, I have 20 times 4, but I have 80.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful.
that you're pulling it in and you're identifying with it in a positive manner.
And I think also, I'm being very literal now, right? The term I have,
Yes,
means, I achieved, I own, I've got something under my belt. I really, really like that example.
yes.
That's beautiful. Thanks for elaborating on this. The second point that I want to briefly comment on is, the need or let's say society telling us that there is a need to look young. I think there are also, the opposite examples. We have to look for them, but we can find them. I think half a year ago, I posted a magazine cover of Vanity Fair or something with, I think, an Asian tattooed woman in her 90s on the cover. And the cover was there to celebrate what you just said, having, right, the life experience, the wisdom that spoke to you through every pore of that woman's skin, which was absolutely beautiful. But those examples are few and rare to come across. And then, the last point, and that is a terribly transactional one. I loved how you established the importance of us as a target audience, right, as a targetable segment in dirty, ugly marketing speech, because that's purely ignorant and not smart of the marketing industry to focus on the audience of 25 to 45 if the 50 to 100-year-olds have so much money to spend either on their own behalf or on behalf of others. I totally agree.
The majority of ads that I see at a certain time on television, let's say from 5 o'clock, probably till around 8, are geared towards older people. But what they are drugs,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So constant drugs. And I don't watch television very much, but I'm fascinated with these commercials.
Hey, look, I know these anti-constipation medication in order to counter the side effects of my erectile dysfunction meds. So I'm
Yes.
totally aware. Yeah, I'm an expert.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm totally blown away by this. And when I watch it, I think to myself, oh, gee, do I need all this medication? I'm different, I guess, because I don't take it. I don't identify with the people on the screen, yet that's what they're trying to portray me as. So there's this big disconnect that I get. So.
I mean, I would love to jump in with a slightly different context for a lot of the sort of internalized and normalized ageist ideas that both Scott and Sherida have brought up in the course of this discussion. So my engagement with ageism as a topic is actually primarily through looking at sport, and particularly what's called masters sport. So there's another term for you, Jan. Not old people sport, although that's what it means. Masters sport.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm thinking. If someone, says, "Oh, you're running the Masters," I'm like, yeah.
It's interesting how it's sort of, it's come to mean something. And it, specifically, I look at Masters rowing because that's what I know. That's what I'm engaged in personally. And it's the thing I have the most experience of and the most opportunity to collect data points on. And what I think is interesting about Masters sport is that it calls into question by its very existence fundamental assumptions about what is sport. So that if we think about, what is expressed as the Olympic ideal, for instance, of faster, higher, stronger, I probably got those in the wrong order. The premium there, the emphasis is on maximizing physical vigor, force, etc. So really, if that's who you're talking about, you're looking for a competition of men at their sort of peak health. That's it, essentially. If we're talking about the fastest, the strongest. Is that all sport is? I'm going to argue no, that there are different visions of sport, different standards of sport possible, and that master sport, much like parasport, so sport that is engaged in by people with either physical or mental disability, that's an entirely different approach and criteria and standard for excellence in sport, as master sport is. Because one of the things with ageism is sometimes in the rush to defend against it, we're tempted to deny what are very real declines. All right, master sport is different because, in my experience anyway, as a rower, I get slower every year. I'm not as strong as I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That's just inescapable. Does it mean I am a lesser rower? I would argue no, because I'm gaining experience every year. And in any high level sport, experience actually counts for quite a lot, especially if there's a demanding technique involved. So, I would argue that masters rowing is qualitatively a different sport than rowing by juniors or by people in sort of that kind of prime, what in rowing is called seniors, which is where you would see people who are doing it full-time professionally. And I think that, if you look at parasport, you see the same thing. Additionally, I don't want to get into this because this could be a podcast in of itself. I would argue that the entrance of transgender athletes into sport has also brought up exactly these kinds of questions about, well, what standard are we applying here? And so that the point I'm just trying to make is that there is this possibility of envisioning an entirely different standard for things where we take for granted there's only one standard, that younger is better and old is maybe okay.
Can I jump in, Jan, just because I wanted to totally agree here. I think it's a quick point. The term master, I've never liked it because it does not mean mastery, which is what you would assume it would mean if you're putting that label on.
Yeah.
So, which is, I would think it would only be appropriate to use that term if it did mean that, like that you have become, you've done the 10,000 hours, or you are the, the one who's achieved that level of ability. And so I think it just, the way it's used now is just because they don't want to use another word like senior or whatever like that, which is really, anyways, I've never agreed with that term. So go ahead, Jan,
No,
sorry.
yeah. So Jeanette, first of all, thanks for bringing the physical into the conversation here. Because I personally struggle with this right now in this very moment. At the same time, I do not fully agree with your observation. I might be a little too tuned into the sports scenes, right? So, for example, in tennis, I think for decades, masters players such as John McEnroe or Martina Navratilova, Chris Evert, they're still touring the world, playing exhibition games. I agree with you. It's seen as being at a lower standard than what the guys and people on the ATP tour do. But people pay in order to watch these masters play. It is interesting. And John McEnroe, I have no idea how old he is right now. I don't even know how old Martina Navratilova is, but they are still playing and they are still around. And in ultra running, you still have 50-year-olds who make it into the top 10 of long races. And the masters do experience more and more recognition. So I am a little hopeful. That, I come back to the term segment, that the segment of the masters is going to gain importance and weight in the future, particularly as more and more consumers of sports are also masters, right? And I would think, be naturally interested in what their peers in their age peer group are up to. All right. One thing that I wanted to briefly get back to is what Sherida mentioned around the need, right? So I think you spoke in the context of advertising that you are confronted with, and that you ask yourself, do I really need this stuff, right? And the question to me is, what do we actually need, and what are we told we are needing, right? Who is it who tells us that we need something? In my own case, I come out of a family full of lawyers. One of them does basically custody for elderly people and intellectually impaired people. And that cousin of mine gave me a call 3 years ago while my mother was visiting, suggesting that we have a conversation about the mental health and fitness of my mother. Which blew my mind, because that was at a time when I was talking at least twice a week with my mom. My mom is doing incredibly well, and if anything, my mom is mentally fitter than that cousin. However, right, he does that for a living. He takes custody of old people, and he is sitting with a 75-year-old in that case, and thinks, yeah, someone needs to look after that woman, while she is totally capable of looking after herself. You could argue or ask the question, was he raised or was he trained to think this way, right? So what is it that kind of makes us think that we need to help and support elderly people or old people? I even remember my mother, on one of her first visits to New York, she felt offended when someone on the subway offered her a seat, right? Which is a nice thing. I mean, whoever did it, right, did it out of compassion, trying to do the right thing. But, my mother thought, what? I'm not old. Who do you think I am? I can totally stand here 10 stops, 15 stops.
When it happens to David and I on the subway or the bus, David has begun to say, look, we're really younger than we look. We can stand, but yes, it's that kind of thing. If you're beyond a certain age, then you need help, right?
Well, sorry, I just want to amplify what Sherida's saying, because I think this is what I'm trying to argue. If you embrace a unitary standard, that there is only one vision of excellence, of accomplishment, and old people aren't it, they're not making it, then you're going to, any form of difference is just different, right? You're not going to accept, oh, there is an entire spectrum of difference. There's a multitude of different kinds of people who are aged or are elders, instead of just assuming, well, they're not young. Yeah. Therefore, they're going to need a seat. Therefore, they're going to need a babysitter.
Yes. A babysitter, or they're going to need things explained to them. One of the things that drives me crazy is when people try to explain the internet to me, or when they try to show me how, I can communicate online. I just had that experience actually a few days ago, and I had to tell the person, I have a lot of experience online. It's fine. I'm understanding what you're saying. It's okay.
You don't have to talk to me as if I am a baby.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, that happens all the time.
That I think also, sorry, I just want to jump in and label something. To me, that points to the intrinsic ableism of ageism.
Exactly.
Right? That's the other thing that the sport angle really brings right to the surface.
Beautiful. Yeah. Scott?
Well, I was just going to, yeah, I mean, I always, in thinking in context like that 90% of the time it's coming from a place of care, and yes, it's misinterpreting the situation, but it's not malicious. It's coming from a place of care. And so there is a natural, desire, I think,
it's misinformed.
To care for others. It may be misinformed, but would you rather somebody errs on the side of that, or rather someone errs on the side of completely ignoring and not offering a seat, or not, because there could be a situation where there's somebody who does need one. And so I have seen situations on the bus, where somebody gets on or on the streetcar, somebody gets on who does need a seat, and it's everybody else's heads down. And doesn't get up and doesn't get out of the way for them. So me personally, I would rather have a situation where you say, actually, thank you very much, but I'm okay, I don't need to stand, versus, right, a situation where they completely ignore anyone who comes in who might potentially need to sit down.
I don't disagree with you, Scott. My suspicion is, though, if we maintain that perspective or that prejudice, that approach, right, that we then might miss out on quite a lot, because if we show up this way, and I agree with you, as I said in my original example, whoever offered my mom a seat only wanted good for her, right? But as long as we approach people like my mother that way, we do not stand a chance to leverage, right, what, to stay with Jeanette's example, my mom might have to offer, because she is still able. And once you are basically deemed, unable, then, no one engages with you or picks up on what you have to offer or can bring to the table. And I think that might be actually a risk here, despite of, hurt or not hurt feelings for us, because we basically do not tap into a pool of experience, wisdom, knowledge, and even care and love, I would argue.
Well, I would argue, why does being not able make you not human?
Right. Yeah. Relevant. Right. Relevance is my favorite term here, because I noticed that, at one point, people in society stop even looking at you or noticing you. I had that is a terrible example here, but, I noticed at one point, I spoke to a woman, and after I'd done speaking with her, I noticed that that woman had not even considered me, as a man, because I was not relevant as a man to her for her because I was just, already too old out of that relevant set. So my question would be, as ecopunks, our ambition is to change, to impact ecosystems. How could we possibly change that? Do we need an anchor elder who is showing the world what the potential is and what the abilities are? How can we change that misinformed misperception that is wrong and doing harm to everyone, even to marketeers that basically fail at their jobs?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you have to tackle this core issue of the inability to accept variety and difference.
Yeah.
That if you are still sticking to this one, like, this is why I keep coming back to the able thing. So we assume that not only are old people unable, but that people who are disabled, it's going to be obvious and we'll be able to spot it right away. To go back to Scott's scenario on the bus, what about the person with the invisible disability who desperately needs that seat, but you can't look at them and know that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're so wedded to these, to go back to Sherida's amazing, invocation of cognitive misers. We want to just, the stereotypes are easy, right? They are a kind of shorthand for us. And maybe that's what we need to be sort of chipping away at, is that groove is so easy to fall into. Those assumptions are so easy to make. And maybe they need to be made a little more difficult.
And I think you labeled it correctly, groove, because that's what it really is. It is a groove that repeats itself and is a rhythm that kind of is the soundtrack to our lives, our society, right?
And
yeah.
So Jan, just to build on, I love the cognitive miser concept in this case, because I think it's very difficult for anybody who is not in that situation to understand, because it's really that subjective experience of being somebody who is over the age of 50, 60 or 70 is cognitively closed to anybody who's younger. So in that case, maybe it is a good thing that people are asking and checking, and saying, do you want a seat? Because only through that can they learn that somebody at that age might not need a seat. If they don't engage, and if there's no sort of participation or attempt to outreach, even if it's misplaced and there are assumptions that are behind that, those assumptions will never change if they don't make those efforts. So if somebody asks, 5 people in a row, would you like the seat? And those 5 people say, no, I'm great, I'm good to stand. Then that person who asked that question would hopefully now understand that I don't need to always ask that. That person is like, those individuals are capable of continuing to stand. And so my bias is changing. I don't know. So maybe it's, that's the way to think about it.
I think that that is okay in terms of the individual. Right. But I think I'm trying to think of how we could address this on a more community or societal level, because that's where it really will make a difference. It needs some kind of push behind it, some kind of wave behind it, so that the stereotype is confronted. But we don't have a lot of that. I go back to, there is as much individual difference for somebody who is my age across a spectrum. We are all quite different. And it's the same way as any other age that you're going to go through. But it's really easy for us to make snap judgments on stereotypes, etc. Whether you're disabled, whether it's a stereotype in terms of women, or whether it's a stereotype in terms of race. we jumped there really fast. And I'm guilty of it too, you know. So
Not only do we jump there super fast, anecdotal evidence here. I heard a story yesterday, really, really impressive. A podcast host basically, told about his household. He's having Alexa, and he noticed how his sons and also he himself started to abuse Alexa, right? So verbally, shut the F up, Alexa. And then he did the following. He changed the voice from a female to a male voice and noticed that the amount of verbal abuse on behalf of his sons towards Alexa and also on behalf of himself, he was really ashamed. He said, hey, I noticed I was much less abusive to that male Alexa voice, right? So, prejudice and abuse, totally agree with you.
But
Sherida,
I just want to pick up on that for a second, because all of these isms, right? All of the racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, they all have a common core, which is a kind of a fear of others or of difference. And I would say with ageism, that fear has to do with something that is, I would say, pretty culturally specific, a fear of death and a fear of illness, and a kind of a larger cultural, lack of conversation, or we don't grapple with those things here, and we just reject it and try to hide from it. Though they're both pretty big factors in age, so I think it explains a lot about some of these ageist attitudes, which are second nature.
In terms of death, I think that's a bit of an elephant in the room as well, right? I mean, young people basically looking at older people, thinking, "Yeah, look, this is coming to an end here. Why bother?" Do you think that a shift of perception with regards to life might help here? What I mean with this is that, looking at it, you could say life exists prior to birth, right? So death is the opposite to birth, but it might not be the opposite to life. Do you think that a slightly, more expansive view would change that perception of, what our role here is? Or am I getting too woo-woo here with birth?
I think any conversation about death would be an improvement. We just don't talk about it. It's just, and to go back to your point about young people, none of us are going to get out of here alive. Doesn't matter how old you are. So the fact that we don't discuss this continues to astonish me. We warehouse the elderly and the ill because we that desperately do not want to be confronted with this reality. So yes, any conversation would be great, Jan. All ideas welcome. There's your next podcast series.
Well, so we still have a bunch of episodes in this one here, right? So let's cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, I think you touched on a good point. Well, no, I just think you touched on a good point. And I think, it's the idea, once you accept death, right? Once you accept it and are comfortable with it, then I think you are more open to other things. You're more open to other perspectives, and you're more open to enjoying life every single day. And then you understand that you can do that no matter what age you're at, right? There are always joys in the gift of life every morning, being able to get up every morning. And Jan, we've had conversations around this, right?
Yeah.
The idea of accepting death.
Yeah.
And understanding it and not fearing it.
But
and
coming
in
back
that case, to Jeanette, is like, once you do that, then you're comfortable with it. You can be around it. You can be in the space. You can have the conversations, and you realize just, like it is a celebration of life to discuss death, right?
So with regards to ableism and isms, right? Maybe I put on a different hat now. I put on the hat of my 17-year-old daughter, who thinks still to this day that my mother is by far the smartest, wisest, and also most beautiful woman in the entire world, right? Since my daughter is 4 years old, she loves her grandmother and the experience and the wrinkled skin, right? Everything about her. And I'm serious. My daughter has conversations here with me whenever we have an argument. She's like, shall we call grandma? As if my mom knew better than I did, right? And she says,
it probably does, John. You know, in a lot
thanks,
of
Scott.
cases.
Thanks for keeping it real here, Scott. I appreciate it. I'm glad you could make it today. No, but she also repeatedly says, wow, Dad, you know, I can't believe anyone knows as much as grandma does, right? So, you know, obviously, you know, grandchildren, and I felt the same about my grandmother, grandchildren have that admiration, right? That godlike admiration for their grandparents, or tend to have it. Why does it stop? If grandchildren are able to have that, right, why do we stop to kind of regard the elderly or elders this way? What happens? Because at some point it seems to be there, right? This kind of smartest, wisest person in the world, and then, can't hear that well anymore. Why bother?
Is it because it's outside the family context? I don't know. Sorry, Sherida, go ahead.
Interestingly, my grandson, in discussion with David, looked at him at one point in time and went, boomer, right? And that, you know, that's an insult. And, you know, you have to catch the grandchild. Now, he's older. He's not a little person. He's 21. He's post-university. But he has picked up along the way, whether it was as a teenager or whether, you know, it's from, you know, his friends, etc., to denigrate by using that term. Yet I know he loves us, right? It's really quite evident, but that kind of denigration is also right there. So do we learn it from, you know, our friends? I don't know.
Schools, media, right?
It's part of your becoming an adult, right? Children don't have to disavow the elderly because they understand how distant they are from that. Once you're an adult and you're much closer to old age, of course you're going to do everything you can to differentiate yourself from that. And that is going to include, in particular, distancing yourself from everything perceived negative about that state.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So...
yeah.
I'm wondering why we do not have more old people that are being celebrated, you know, in the publicly. You know, artists, directors, musicians. Let's ignore the Rolling Stones here; they are ageless. But you know, they're brilliant minds, brilliant old people do exist. You know, where are they? Why do we not embrace that and hold that up as an example? Again, you know, let's get back to me for a second. There was a time when I thought once you hit 40, everything is over and done. And then, you know, I was surprised to actually watch shows of my favorite musicians who went solo and started touring again in their mid-50s. And they looked like they were having the time of their lives on stage. And I still remember one show in particular that I left and thought, oh, wow, this is great. I can still have a good time for the next 10, 15 years, right? So I thought 40, that's it. But then I, you know, saw an example which was encouraging and basically telling me there still is relevance and life for me here, culturally, even if I am able to embrace it. So, you know, where does it stop? Why do we not do a better job celebrating this? And do we think that that is going to change? I mean, there are attempts by certain individuals in our society. You know, Chip Conley has started his Academy of the Elders. Not sure what that really is about, but I feel, you know, there are the occasional initiatives in order to elevate experience. And I like the I have years under my belt thing to a higher level.
I want to jump in because I'm going to argue that North American society, maybe Western society generally, doesn't really have any clear-cut rites of passage for the transition through the different stages of the life course. So we end up with people still trying to be adolescent, when they're well into their 30s, and we hit 40 and don't really understand what is happening because there's no marker there. Same thing happens as we get elderly. And as a result, all we focus on is what we've lost. We have no sense of what we're gaining in the new stage. Sure, you give up things as you go through the different stages, but you gain riches as well. And nobody is pointing that out to us, where I think some kind of initiation or some sort of ritual, that would be a big part of what it would do, is here's what goes with this stage.
Yeah, you brought celebrating back up here. That was what we had labeled our last conversation with David. And I agree with you, because it's not a constant decline, right? There's also something that you pick up as, you might lose some things. So, yeah, it's really, really mind-boggling that we fail to ignore this and focus exclusively, because you're absolutely right, Jeanette. We focus exclusively on what's not working well. We focus exclusively from a marketing perspective on those constipation and heart rate medications, instead of having something, anything joyful to confront people with and bring forward to society. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to one of your points around celebrating artists and stuff who are later in their career. Just as you were talking about it, I thought, there's individuals, being Canadian, I would talk about Leonard Cohen or Gordon Lightfoot and others who, and Joni Mitchell, who is, he has had, like, the depth of her impact to the musical world is becoming clearer every day, right? And it continues to have significant impact. And so my question, to build on what you were saying, is, do you get the license to have that impact when you are later in your career because you've succeeded and done so much before you, when you were younger? And then some other question to that would be, would you, if you start to achieve something like that later in your life, is it held up as like an exception? Like, oh my gosh, look at this. Here's this 90-year-old who's gone back and gotten, their master's, right? And
so
you see a lot of articles written like that. It's not sort of, it's not like, oh, this is par for the course. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this, or whatever, like that.
So you mean where is the young 65-year-old novelist who published his first piece of fiction?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't that Toni Morrison? She started fairly late in life.
Very late.
Yeah,
very late.
Yeah.
Very late. Very late.
But do people talk about that? And is it held up as an example?
It's rather an exception. I would agree.
So it's an interesting. Where does that momentum have to start in order to be recognized?
We need to be a little conscious of time here. We need to wrap this up very, very soon. Are there any final closing thoughts, Sherida, Jeanette?
I would love to hear from Sherida.
Well,
me too.
I think that an older person as well is fighting in their minds about the stereotypes that they have carried with them their whole lives. So I can diss the stereotypes that other people have, but it requires a great deal of courage and wisdom for me to fight the stereotypes that I carry with me, even though I have had positive examples of older people, but it's still there in me, and it takes a conscious effort not to say, oh, gee, I don't know that I can learn that because I'm 75. When in actual fact, I can. And it's fun. But we tell ourselves, oh no, I can't pick up Spanish. I'm 75 years old. What do you want from me? But in fact, if you go on Duolingo and it becomes a game for you, you find that you do pick up Spanish quite easily.
Yeah, or what do you think, you're doing buying running shoes at 71? Don't make a fool of yourself, right?
What people actually have said to David, don't you think it's time you felt your age and didn't play hockey twice a week?
Yeah.
David's 78, but he plays hockey twice a week and he loves it, but people will say, it's time you stop.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing with, buying running shoes at 72, that's another family example of mine. And when that person then asked me, hey, how should I deal with this? I asked her, okay, whoever said that, tell me about that person. What are they doing in their lives? How healthy are they? And that was a very short conversation. And then we looked at 5 more years of running afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. That was really, really nice. An incredible treat. We covered a lot of ground, solved very, very little, which was not to be expected here. But I loved the overall sentiment and also the ambition and goals that I feel we have collectively. We spoke about cognition quite a bit today. In the next episode, we will talk about cognition specifically, about both losing it and also gaining it. Because, as we established in this one, cognition is not only going down, it can actually go up again as we age as well. Until then, thank you very, very much to the 3 of you. Thank you everyone who listened up to this point. Have a happy holiday season, and we are going to be back very, very soon with cognition, decline and growth in age. Thank you very much. Happy holidays.